The Zarathian Empire had been in turmoil for years, ever since Queen Alara, their mighty ruler, was frozen in time. The once vibrant and thriving empire had been left in a state of uncertainty. The grand palace, which had once echoed with the sound of music and laughter, now felt empty and still. The queen's disappearance was more than just a loss of leadership. It was as if the very soul of the empire had been frozen along with her. No one knew what had caused the anomaly that trapped her in that state. Scientists from across the galaxy had tried everything they could think of, but the queen's condition remained unchanged. She was not dead, yet not alive. She had been trapped in a frozen moment in time, her body suspended in an eternal sleep. It was as though the universe itself had paused her existence, waiting for something, or someone, to break the curse. The people of Zorath were in mourning, yet there was a glimmer of hope that never seemed to fade. Princess Alicia, the queen's only daughter, refused to give up. She believed in her mother's return. She was the one who had kept the flame of hope alive in the empire, even as the people began to doubt that anyone could save their beloved queen. Alicia spent her days by her mother's side, her heart heavy with the knowledge that nothing could be done. She would hold the queen's hand, her touch gentle, as if she could somehow reach through the frozen barrier and bring her mother back. She would whisper to her, sharing news of the empire, telling her of the changes, the struggles, and the victories they had achieved despite the queen's absence. But the truth weighed heavily on Alicia's shoulders. The empire was on the brink of war, torn apart by external threats and internal strife. The people were growing restless, and the once proud Zarathian military, once feared across the galaxy, was losing its edge. Without the guidance of their queen, the empire had been faltering, unsure of how to handle the rising tensions in the galaxy. Alicia, despite her resolve, knew that time was running out. The fragile peace that the empire had held for so long was beginning to crumble. And yet, there was something deep within her that refused to believe that all was lost. She had heard the stories, the whispers that the human who had once saved her mother would return. The very thought seemed impossible. But for some reason, Alicia could not shake the belief that he was the key to bringing her mother back. It was a story that had been passed down among the royal family for generations. Long ago, during a time of great peril, when the Zarathian Empire was at war with a rival galactic power, Queen Alara had been captured. The enemy forces had laid siege to the capital, and the queen had been taken prisoner. Desperate and on the verge of losing everything, she had been saved by a human, a soldier from Earth, who had somehow managed to infiltrate the enemy stronghold and rescue her. The human's name was Kael Solari, and his actions had become the stuff of legend. It was said that he had fought his way through impossible odds, rescuing the queen and saving the empire from certain destruction. But after that moment, Kael had vanished. No one knew where he had gone, and many had assumed that he had perished in the aftermath of the war. Alicia, however, had always held on to the belief that Kael was still out there, somewhere in the galaxy, waiting for the moment when he would be needed again. She had heard the stories from her mother, who had spoken of Kael with great admiration. Alara had trusted him, and Alicia had always felt a deep connection to him, even though she had never met him. As the days passed and the situation in the Empire grew more dire, Alicia received unexpected news. It was a messenger from the outer colonies, someone who had traveled from the far reaches of the galaxy to deliver a message. The message was simple, but it carried a weight that made Alicia's heart race with anticipation. "The human has returned," the messenger said. At first, Alicia thought it was a cruel joke. How could this be true? How could Kael Solari, a man who had been lost to the stars, have returned after all these years? And yet, the messenger's eyes were filled with sincerity, and Alicia knew that this was not a trick. The human who had once saved her mother was coming back, and with him, perhaps the hope of saving her. The news spread quickly throughout the Empire. Whispers of Kael's return reached the farthest corners of the galaxy. stirring up a mix of excitement and skepticism. The people of Zorath were divided. Some believed that Kale was the key to breaking the curse that had trapped their queen, while others were unsure, having grown tired of empty promises and false hope. As for Elysia, she could hardly contain her excitement. She had spent so many years clinging to the belief that Kale would return, and now her faith was being tested. She had to see him with her own eyes. She had to know if he could truly save her mother, as the stories had promised. The journey to the capital was long, but Elysia was determined. She knew that the fate of her mother, and the fate of the entire empire, rested in Kale's hands. When she finally arrived at the royal palace, she found herself standing before the grand entrance, waiting for the arrival of the one person who could change everything. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden light over the city as Elysia stood in the courtyard, her heart racing with anticipation. The palace was silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for the arrival of the man who had become a legend. And then, as the shadows grew longer, she saw him. Kale Solari stood before her, a man shaped by time and war, his face weathered and his body scarred from battles past. He was not the same man who had once fought to save her mother, but there was something unmistakably familiar about him. His presence was powerful, almost magnetic, as if the universe itself had chosen him for this moment.
Elysia took a step forward, her voice trembling as she spoke.
Kale Solari, she said, her words barely a whisper. You've come back! Kale looked at her, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. He had known this moment would come, but even he was unprepared for the flood of emotions that surged within him. He had never imagined that he would stand before the daughter of the queen he had once saved, but here she was, a woman now, carrying the weight of an entire empire on her shoulders. I've come to save her, Kale said, his voice low but steady. I promised your mother that I would, and I intend to keep that promise. The tension in the air was palpable. Elysia knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would take them both to the edge of the galaxy, and perhaps even beyond the very fabric of time itself. But, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that it was possible. Kale had returned. And with him, hope. The capital of the Zorathian Empire was alive with activity, but beneath the hustle and bustle of daily life, a quiet tension hung in the air. The citizens of the Empire had heard the rumors. The human, Kale Solari, was back. The hero who had once saved their queen was now returning, but the questions remained. Could he truly save her again? Could a single human, no matter how skilled or brave, break the curse that had trapped their queen in time? It was a question that no one had an answer to, but one that everyone had an opinion about. Elysia stood by the palace gates, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined that this moment would come so soon. The human who had once been a distant legend was now standing before her, a man shaped by battles and scars that marked his soul just as much as they did his body. He was different, yes, hardened by time and loss, but the essence of the man who had saved her mother remained. Kale Solari was not just a man. He was a symbol of hope, of possibility, and in the moment he stepped into the palace, Elysia's mind swirled with questions she wasn't sure she had the answers to. What could he do? Could he really save the queen, her mother, the one who had ruled with compassion and wisdom? Could he defeat the force that had stopped time itself? Kale, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking his name aloud might shatter the fragile thread of hope she had been clinging to for years. The soldier stood before her, his eyes scanning the palace around him. He was silent for a moment, taking it all in. The grandeur of the place, the weight of the expectation in the air. Finally, his gaze met hers. I never thought I'd be here again, Kale said, his voice gruff. It was a voice that had seen too much, done too much. I didn't think I'd ever return to this place, to you. Elysia swallowed hard, struggling to keep her emotions in check. She had been waiting for this moment, And yet now that it had arrived, the enormity of it all seemed to overwhelm her. The man who had once saved her mother was standing in front of her, and he wasn't the same. He was older, changed, but there was still that same fire in his eyes, the same drive to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "How?" Alicia asked, the question escaping her lips before she could stop it. "How did you survive?"
We thought you were lost.
Kyle looked away, a haunted look in his eyes.
I was lost.
For a long time, but I kept moving forward. When I had to. There were people out there. People who needed me. I couldn't just stop. "You're here to save my mother, aren't you?" Alicia asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. She had heard the stories, but now that Kale was standing before her, the reality of the situation was sinking in. "You said you promised her, but how?" "What can you do?" Kale took a deep breath, the weight of her question heavy on his shoulders. He had come all this way, risking his life, hoping against hope that he could do what he had once done before, save a queen, save a people, and maybe even save himself in the process. But this time was different. This time, the stakes were higher, the consequences greater. He wasn't sure if even he could accomplish the impossible again. "I don't know if I can break the curse," Kale admitted, his voice low. "But I'm going to try. Your mother. She saved me once. I owe her everything." "I'll do whatever it takes." Alicia nodded, the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Thank you." That's all I need to hear. With the Queen's daughter's blessing, Kale set his mind to the task at hand. The first step he knew was to understand the anomaly that had frozen Alara in time. He had heard whispers of a force greater than any known technology, a cosmic event that defied the laws of nature. It was not something he could just fight with weapons or strength. This would require something far deeper. Kale's mind raced with the possibilities. Was it an artifact? A weapon? A curse? The next few days were spent in the royal archives, scouring through ancient texts and documents, looking for anything that could shed light on the mystery. Alicia stood by his side, helping him whenever she could. She had grown up surrounded by the history of her people, and she knew more about the Empire's secrets than she let on. But the answers they were seeking seemed to remain just beyond their reach. Each time they thought they had uncovered something meaningful, it slipped through their fingers like sand. It wasn't long before Kale's search led him to a startling discovery. Hidden deep within the royal records was a tale that had been long forgotten, a story that many believed to be nothing more than a legend. The story spoke of an ancient enemy, a force that existed beyond the fabric of space and time. This entity, the story said, had the power to bend time itself, trapping people in frozen moments, controlling the flow of reality. No one had ever seen this enemy, but the records indicated that it was only a matter of time before it returned. "That's the key," Kale said as he stood up, a realization dawning upon him. "The curse. It's not just an accident. Someone or something is controlling it. We need to find out who or what is behind this." Alicia's face grew pale. "But how?"
How do we fight something that controls time itself? Kale's eyes narrowed. "We fight it the only way we know how, by not giving up."
"We need to find the source of the anomaly, and we need to do it before it's too late." As the days passed, Kale and Alicia's search grew more desperate. The people of Zoreth had begun to lose faith. News of their queen's continued slumber spread throughout the Empire, and whispers of her eternal rest filled the air. Some even began to question whether there was any point in continuing the fight. Without the queen, the Empire was vulnerable. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, and the enemies they faced were only growing stronger. Alicia knew that time was running out. Every day her mother remained frozen was another day the Empire weakened, another day the enemy grew stronger. She couldn't bear to lose her mother again, not like this. She had already lost so much, and the thought of losing everything sent a chill down her spine. But Kale didn't give up. His resolve was unwavering. He had faced impossible odds before, and he was willing to face them again, even if it meant sacrificing everything for Alicia, for the Queen, for the galaxy. The next piece of the puzzle came when Kale discovered a map, an ancient star chart that had been hidden away for centuries. It was a map that led to a place beyond the known reaches of the galaxy, to a place where time itself seemed to break down. Kale had no idea what he would find there, but he knew one thing for sure. If he was going to stop the curse, he had to go there. "I'll go," Alicia said, determination in her voice. "I'm not going to sit by and wait for someone else to save us. This is my mother, and I will help you." Kale turned to her, a look of concern crossing his face. "You don't know what's out there, Alicia. It's dangerous." "I don't care," she replied.
I'm not going to lose my mother. Not again.
"We can do this. Together." With no other option, Kale nodded. They would venture into the unknown together, searching for the source of the curse that had trapped the Queen, hoping that, somehow, they could break the chain that had bound her for so long. The journey ahead would be filled with danger, uncertainty, and the threat of the unknown. But as Kale and Alicia prepared to leave the safety of the palace, they both knew one thing. They would stop at nothing to save the Queen.
The journey to the unknown part of the galaxy was one of uncertainty and danger, yet Kale and Alicia remained determined.
The map they had uncovered led them through uncharted space, a place where even the bravest explorers feared to tread. The further they ventured, the more the stars seemed to fade into darkness, as though the very fabric of space itself was being stretched and pulled in ways that defied understanding. Alicia sat in the quiet of the ship, staring out the window into the void. Her mind was a whirl of thoughts, each one more troubling than the last. Her mother's condition weighed heavily on her heart, but there was something more troubling that lingered at the back of her mind. The legends Kale had uncovered spoke of an enemy, a force that manipulated time itself, but no one knew what it looked like, where it came from, or how it could be defeated. "I don't like this," Alicia said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but full of concern. Kale, who had been at the controls, glanced over at her. "I don't either. But we have no choice. If we don't stop whatever's out there, your mother will never wake up." "The Empire will fall." Alicia nodded, though the fear inside her only grew. She had heard stories of things beyond the stars, of powerful beings and cosmic forces, but this was different. This wasn't just a distant enemy. This was something that controlled time, a force so great that even the Queen, with all her power and wisdom, had been helpless against it. "We're getting closer," Kale said, adjusting the ship's course. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we'll find when we reach this place." The further they flew, the more the surroundings seemed to warp. The stars flickered, and the space between them began to feel thinner, as if they were passing through a veil that separated one reality from another. Alicia's skin prickled with a strange energy, one that seemed to press down on her, almost suffocating in its weight. She had never experienced anything like this, and the closer they got to their destination, the more she felt the pull of something powerful and ancient. Eventually, they arrived. The place marked on the map was not a planet or a star. It was a vast, swirling black hole, a rift in space-time itself. It hung there, suspended in the dark expanse, like a wound in the universe. The ship slowed as it approached the edge of the anomaly. The gravitational pull was strong, but Kale expertly navigated through it, keeping the ship steady as they neared the heart of the rift.
"This is it," Kale said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself.
"The heart of the anomaly. The source of whatever is holding your mother." Alicia felt a lump form in her throat. There was no going back now. They had come this far, and the only way forward was through the unknown. She turned her gaze to Kale, her heart racing. "What do we do now?" Kale studied the rift for a moment, his face serious. We go in. Whatever's on the other side, we need to face it. We can't stop now. Alicia hesitated, the weight of what lay ahead making her stomach twist. She had always known there was a price to pay for this journey, but now that they were on the edge of the unknown, the fear of the consequences seemed overwhelming. Yet, she could see the resolve in Kale's eyes, and something within her stirred. If Kale believed they could do it, then maybe, just maybe, they could. Together, they flew into the rift. The ship shook as they entered the black hole, the forces of gravity pulling and twisting them in strange, unpredictable directions. Alicia gripped the sides of her seat, her heart pounding as the world outside the ship became a blur of light and shadow. She felt as though she were being pulled into a new dimension, a place where the laws of nature no longer applied. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, and yet, at the same time, everything was accelerating. The tension in the air was thick with a strange energy, as though they were passing through something ancient and alive. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the chaos stopped. The ship emerged from the rift into a place that seemed to exist outside of time itself. It was a vast, empty space filled with swirling clouds of energy and shifting lights. There were no stars, no planets, just the endless expanse of darkness, punctuated by flashes of brilliant light that seemed to pulse with life. Alicia's breath caught in her throat. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. There was something here, something that felt both ancient and powerful, and it was as if the very air itself was charged with a sense of deep, unfathomable knowledge. A deep voice suddenly echoed through the ship, though no one could see where it came from. It was not a voice in the traditional sense, but a feeling, a presence that resonated in their very bones. "You have come," the voice said, its tone cold and ancient, seeking to break what cannot be undone. Alicia's heart skipped a beat. The voice was not of a person, but of something far older, something that seemed to transcend the concept of life itself. It was the enemy, the force behind the curse that had trapped her mother. Bael's hand tightened on the controls. He turned to Alicia, his expression hardening.
Stay close.
Whatever this is, we need to face it head on. The ship began to move, the engine responding to Kale's commands, but it felt as though the very space around them was pushing back. The clouds of energy that filled the space shifted, swirling like a storm as the presence of the enemy grew stronger. "You dare challenge me?" the voice boomed, and this time, Alicia could feel the power in the words. It wasn't just a voice, it was the very essence of time itself, an entity that existed beyond the stars, beyond the galaxies.
I am the weaver of fate. I am the breaker of worlds.
Alicia's mind raced. This was it. This was what they had come to stop. This was the force that had trapped her mother, the force that had brought the universe to its knees. Kale spoke, his voice steady, even in the face of this overwhelming power.
We've come to stop you. The Queen will not remain frozen.
And neither will the galaxy you have manipulated. There was silence for a moment, and then a wave of force surged through the ship, rattling it like a leaf in the wind. Alicia gasped, feeling a sharp pressure in her chest, as if the very fabric of space was pressing in on them. She could feel it. This being was powerful, ancient, and it didn't care for their defiance.
You are fools, the voice said, the tone now laced with amusement. You cannot defeat me.
Time is my domain. You are but ants beneath my feet, and your queen is already lost. Kale's jaw tightened, but his determination remained unshaken. I will not accept that. The queen's life is worth more than your control over time. We are not your puppets. The enemy's voice darkened. Then you will learn the price of defying me. Suddenly, the space around them began to distort. The clouds of energy spun faster, and the very air seemed to crackle with power. The ship was caught in the gravitational pull of the swirling energy, and for a moment, it felt as though they were being torn apart. Alicia gripped the seat again, her body tensing, but Cale remained focused. "We're not giving up," he muttered as if to himself. Then, with a sudden burst of force, Cale slammed the ship's engines to full power, breaking free of the pull. The ship shot forward, heading straight into the heart of the storm. The lights around them flared, the energy flashing with brilliant colors, and the presence of the enemy loomed larger. They were getting closer. "You will regret this," the voice thundered, but Cale and Alicia were no longer listening. They had reached the heart of the rift, and there, in the midst of the swirling energy, they could see it, the source of the curse, the being that had manipulated time itself. It was an entity made of pure energy, a swirling mass of light and darkness, its shape ever-changing, never truly visible, but Alicia could feel it, its presence more real than anything she had ever known. It was alive, ancient, and far more dangerous than they had imagined. But Cale did not falter. He was ready to face whatever came next.
He had come this far, and he would stop this enemy no matter the cost. The heart of the rift was unlike anything Cale or Alicia had ever imagined.
The swirling mass of energy before them was not just a force of nature. It was alive. An ancient entity that had existed long before the first stars had burned in the sky. It was the source of the anomaly that had trapped Queen Alara in time, the force that had brought the galaxy to the edge of destruction. Now, standing before it, Cale and Alicia knew that the time had come to face it. The presence of the enemy pressed down on them, thick and suffocating. Every moment they spent within the heart of the rift felt like an eternity, the air itself bending under the weight of its power. It wasn't just a matter of surviving. It was a fight to defy the very laws of reality itself. The universe around them seemed to bend and twist, time itself stretching and pulling in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. The very fabric of existence felt fragile, like a thread ready to snap. Cale kept his hand steady on the controls, the ship shuddering as it fought against the pull of the entity. The rift was alive, constantly shifting, the energies inside it crackling with a power that was almost overwhelming. He could feel the tension building in the air, the energy pushing against them. But he didn't let it show. He couldn't afford to show fear. Not now. "Cale, what are we going to do?" Alicia's voice broke through the silence, her voice tight with worry. She had been so sure that they would find a way to save her mother. But now, as they faced the entity itself, doubt began to creep in. Kyle glanced at her, his face set in a hard expression. "We fight. We can't let it win. Your mother's life is worth everything. We won't let it take her."
"We're here to stop it." Alicia nodded, though her hands trembled in her lap.
She had never imagined that she would be facing something like this, something so powerful that it could bend the very fabric of time. Yet here they were, standing on the edge of the universe, fighting for their lives, and for the life of the Queen. The enemy's voice echoed around them again, cold and full of malice. "You dare challenge me? You dare defy the one who controls time itself?" The words seemed to ripple through the ship, vibrating with an energy that made Alicia's skin crawl. "We dare," Cale said, his voice steady. "We're not afraid of you." The presence of the enemy seemed to grow stronger, the very air crackling with its power. Alicia could feel it now, a cold, gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach. It wasn't just a force of nature, it was something more, something ancient and terrible. And it was toying with them, using its control over time to disorient them, to make them doubt themselves. "You cannot defeat me," the enemy's voice thundered. "I am eternal. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars. You are nothing but fleeting moments, insignificant specks in the grand design of the universe." Cale clenched his fists. "We may be small, but we are not powerless. We are human. We fight for what matters. We fight for each other." The ship began to shudder again, more violently this time. Elysia held on tightly, her heart racing in her chest. The force of the enemy's power was overwhelming, but Kale didn't falter. His hands remained steady on the controls, guiding the ship through the storm of energy that surrounded them. The swirling mass of light and darkness before them seemed to pulse, its shape shifting and flickering like a firestorm. It was a living entity, but it was not a being made of flesh and bone. It was made of raw energy, a force beyond comprehension. Kale knew that if they were to have any chance of stopping it, they would need to reach its core, the heart of the anomaly itself. "We need to get closer," Kale said, his voice low. "We can't defeat it from here. We have to get to the source." Alicia looked out the viewport, her eyes wide with fear. "Kale, how do we even know what we're up against? How can we fight something like this?" Kale didn't answer at first. He was focused, his mind racing through every possibility. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This wasn't a battle he could win with just weapons or strength. This was a battle for the very essence of time, a battle to break free from the chains that had bound them all. And it wasn't just about saving Queen Alara anymore. It was about saving everything, the entire galaxy. "We fight with everything we have," Kale said finally, determination in his eyes. "We fight because we can't afford to lose, because if we do, everything will be lost." Alicia nodded, her resolve hardening. She had come this far. She couldn't stop now. She couldn't let the Empire, and her mother, be consumed by this dark force. She looked at Kale, the man who had once saved her mother and now stood by her side, ready to fight again. They were in this together. She wouldn't back down. The ship moved forward, cutting through the shifting energies of the rift. The storm of energy grew more intense as they neared the core, the center of the anomaly where the enemy's power seemed to be the strongest. Elysia could feel the pull of the enemy's influence, trying to drag them off course, but Kale held firm, his focus never wavering. As they neared the heart of the rift, the enemy's voice grew louder, more insistent.
You cannot win. You are nothing.
"Time is my domain, and I will not let you take it from me." Kale gritted his teeth, the ship trembling as it entered the heart of the anomaly. The air around them seemed to twist and warp, as if reality itself was bending in on them. The ship's systems flickered, and for a moment, Elysia feared they would be torn apart by the sheer force of the enemy's power. But Kale didn't stop. He pushed the ship forward, guiding it through the storm of energy, his eyes fixed on the swirling mass of light and darkness before them. And then, finally, they broke through. They were at the center of it all. The rift stretched out around them like an endless expanse of energy, its power so overwhelming that Alicia could barely comprehend it. And in the center of it all stood the entity, its form flickering and shifting, its presence vast and incomprehensible. "You cannot defeat me," the enemy said again, its voice now a low, ominous growl.
"You are nothing but insects, powerless before me." Kale stood tall, his hands steady on the controls. "We are not powerless."
"We have something you will never have, hope, and that is something you can never take from us." The entity seemed to recoil, its form flickering more violently than ever.
Hope? The voice scoffed.
Hope is nothing but an illusion. Time is the only true force.
"It bends all things to its will." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Then let's see what happens when you try to bend us." With a final push, Kale slammed the ship into overdrive, sending it directly toward the heart of the enemy's power. The ship's engines roared, the energy surging around them as they collided with the entity's form. Elysia felt the force of the explosion reverberate through the ship, the energy of the rift crashing against them like a tidal wave. The ship shook violently, and for a moment, Elysia thought they were going to be torn apart. But then, suddenly, everything stopped. The ship was still. The rift around them was silent. Alicia opened her eyes, her breath caught in her throat. The entity was gone. The silence stretched out for a long moment, and then Hale spoke.
It's over.
We did it!
Alicia could hardly believe it. The enemy was gone. The rift was silent. The curse had been broken. The queen, her mother, would be freed. But as the reality of what they had accomplished began to sink in, Alicia couldn't help but feel a sense of loss.
They had defeated the enemy, but at what cost?
The galaxy had been saved, but the journey had taken so much from them. Kale had risked everything to bring her here, and she knew he would never be the same after this. But for now, they had won. They had saved the queen. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, hope began to blossom once again.